Hello and welcome to the Week in Politics with Michelle Grattan. I'm Caroline Fisher, Associate Professor of Journalism at the University of Canberra. Hi Michelle, how are you?
Hi Caroline. Big week again.
Again, it's constant, it never stops, but this week dominated by Australia's response to the COVID-19 situation. Now, the Prime Minister this week, he held several press conferences in relation to it, about the proposed or the Trans-Tasman travel bubble that Prime Minister Ardern announced earlier in the week. He was talking also about the delays in vaccine from Europe. But then last night, most importantly, he held a last-minute press conference announcing sort of a rethink of Australia's vaccine rollout program. So what did he have to say last night?
Well, this was quite an unexpected news conference last night, and it followed advice from medical experts on the AstraZeneca vaccine. That's, of course, been quite controversial overseas, with various studies showing a relationship with blood clots, a very rare relationship, we should stress, but nevertheless serious if it occurs. And the advice from the Australian authorities was that this vaccine should preferably not be given to people under 50, that they should have the Pfizer vaccine, which is the only other one we have immediately available, although it was fine for the older cohort of people. The implication of this immediately is that the people affected will be frontline health workers who haven't been vaccinated already, because they are in this early cohort being done now. The over 70s who are also being done won't be affected, but any of the younger health workers would now need the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay, there's been some criticism this morning that perhaps this is an overreaction. What do you think about that criticism?
I think it's impossible to know, because we are not health experts, medical experts. Clearly, the evidence overseas is somewhat mixed. The reactions, various countries, they're mixed too. The advice all over the place seems to change almost week to week as new information becomes available. There are more studies, and the medical people get across the issues more precisely. But it is obvious that this is quite a conservative position that the government and the authorities in Australia are taking.
Labor has come out this morning and, again, been critical, saying that this is, the government's fault, that they put all of their eggs into the AstraZeneca basket, that they didn't seek supply, from a diverse enough range of sources. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's something in that if we had more vaccines, it would be highly desirable. And of course, even the supplies of AstraZeneca have been held up. They're not coming from Europe, and this has already caused a problem. So we've had delays in this rollout really from the beginning. CSL, which is making that vaccine locally, hasn't ramped up as fast as expected. And now we have the government saying that in the next few days, urgently, it's going to have to overhaul the whole timetable of the program. So I think that at a number of levels, this has been handled poorly by the government. One would have always expected some glitches, but we're just having numerous glitches, it seems. For example, the Prime Minister earlier in the week was apparently being critical of the delays from Europe, the refusal to allow vaccines out. Then he, at a subsequent press conference, was saying, no, I wasn't critical, I was just stating the facts. The government really seems very much at the moment on the back foot. And although it's saying that it's been completely transparent, clearly there's a lot of paddling going on under the surface as they search for supplies and trying to get the logistics of the rollout improved.
Okay, so this is going to have huge flow-on effects, of course. So yes, we did have earlier in the week the New Zealand Prime Minister saying, hey, let's start this travel bubble between our two countries. So what's the likelihood of that continuing without the vaccine rolling out as quickly as it should?
I think it will be all right provided we don't get outbreaks. But when we get outbreaks, then the slowness of the rollout becomes much more important. So any delays, and now we don't know the extent of the delays, but there will obviously be delays, any delays will hold back the return to normal activity. The positive is that at the moment we have on some days no community transmission, on other days very, very little. And that puts us in a good position when we're in a bad position on the rollout front.
So how much of this rethink is about community confidence? That, you know, there is some vaccine hesitancy out there. Do you think that this is a bit of a PR campaign in some ways to try and flag that, look, we are taking this seriously, so please be confident in our approach? Do you think that's behind this?
I don't think it's a PR campaign. I think that it is based, however, on a safety first approach. But in a way, community confidence is a bit knocked about when doubts are raised. So if the government had done nothing and just said, look, we don't think that the evidence from overseas justifies any change, you could argue that would be as helpful to confidence as saying, look, we're going to take this ultra-cautious approach.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's right. It may actually in fact make things worse. That's right, on the confidence front. Look, this week the treatment of women also featured again for the government. At a press conference yesterday, the Prime Minister outlined the government's response to the Respect at Work report delivered by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, more than a year ago. Now, that report was put on the back burner because of the pandemic taking up all of the space. There were more than 50 recommendations. How many are going to be accepted by the government?
Well, there was a fudge here because the government said that of the recommendations, and they refer to state governments too, if I might add, but it was accepting all of them in full, in part, or in principle. So obviously they're not all totally embraced. That's the first point to make. Nevertheless, I think that the changes that are going to be pursued are quite important. They will give more time for people to make complaints. They will make it easier to get rid of people who are sexual harassers, and they will remove the exemption that exists at the moment for federal parliamentarians and judges from the sex discrimination legislation, although how things would be enforced for MPs is totally unclear, seeing they obviously can't be just removed, they're elected by the people. And I think there's some effort by the government to look at whether this can be extended to state MPs too. So there are measures that are going to mean something. On the other hand, I think that the government hasn't embraced the idea of putting much more onus on employers to provide a workplace that's safe from sexual harassment. So the report has received some criticism, or at least not the report, the reaction, the response has received some criticism for not going far enough, but it's certainly progress. Okay, so finally, the behaviour of a federal MP, Andrew Laming, has continued to be in the news this week. What's he done now, Michelle? What's he in trouble for now? He's now being investigated by the Australian Electoral Commission. He's apparently run multiple Facebook pages and they haven't carried the required authorisation. So there's a lot more trouble on the Laming front. But the government is still not saying that he should be banished to the crossbench. And I think that, that this does really reveal double standards. Scott Morrison doesn't want to lose a number, and yet he is talking about the need for better behaviour on multiple fronts by people, by politicians, and not to say, well, enough's enough with Andrew Laming out of the Liberal Party, I think is a bad look.
So what can we expect next week, Michelle? More of the same?
Well, I think we can expect over the next few days a great deal of discussion about the rollout. That's before National Cabinet, which is meeting today. And I think that people will hope that we'll get a good deal more precision about where we are, where we're going, where these vaccine supplies are going to come from, and when we can expect the whole population to be vaccinated by. Whether we'll get that precision is another matter. I suspect we'll still be discussing these things in a week's time with some more information, but not all the information that we want to have.
I look forward to it. Thanks very much, Michelle.
Thanks, Caroline.